My name is Malee, and I need to tell you about the year that changed everything my family believed about the world. I was 19 years old in 1972, living with my parents and three younger siblings in a small village in northern Thailand, about 2 hours from Chiang Mai, by the old dirt roads that connected our community to the outside world. Our life was simple but good. We grew rice in the fields that had belonged to our family for generations, tended a vegetable garden that provided most of our food, and followed the rhythms of planting and harvest that had sustained our people for centuries. My younger sister Yam was 14 then, bright and curious, and full of dreams about finishing school and maybe even going to university in Bangkok someday. She had the kind of laugh that could make our stern father smile after the hardest day in the fields, and a way of seeing beauty in the smallest things. A flower blooming by the path, the way morning light fell through our kitchen window, the patterns that birds made when they flew over our rice paddies. But then came the morning that would begin our family's journey into a darkness we never could have imagined. It started so ordinarily that even now, 50 years later, I sometimes wonder if we might have prevented what happened if we had paid attention to the small signs that something was different about that particular day. The morning began like every other morning in our house. Mother woke before dawn to light the cooking fire and prepare breakfast, the smell of burning wood and brewing tea gradually rousing the rest of us from sleep. Father stretched and sat up on his sleeping mat, already thinking about the work waiting for him in the rice fields. My two younger brothers, 16-year-old Somchai and 12-year-old Niran, yawned and rubbed their eyes, reluctant to leave the warmth of their blankets. And Yam sat up slowly, as she always did, taking her time to fully emerge from whatever dreams had visited her during the night. She would sit quietly for a few minutes each morning, watching the rest of us begin our daily routines, as if she were memorizing these ordinary moments for some future purpose we couldn't understand. "Come, daughters," Mother called to us as she arranged our simple breakfast on the low wooden table where our family gathered for meals. We ate together, as we always did, rice soup with vegetables from our garden, sometimes with a small piece of fish or pork if we had been fortunate. Yam was always the most curious about the world beyond our village during these breakfast conversations. She would ask father about the cities he had visited as a young man, about the schools where children learned to read books in languages other than Thai, about the possibilities that might exist for a girl who dreamed of something more than rice farming. These breakfast conversations were precious to us, though we didn't realize it at the time. They were the foundation of our family bond, the daily ritual that reminded us we belonged to each other, that we were stronger together than any of us could be alone. Therefore, when I think back to that last normal morning, I remember not just what happened, but how safe and complete our world felt within the boundaries of our small village. What I'm about to tell you happened exactly as I remember it. Some details may seem impossible to those who live in cities, who trust only in what science can explain, who have never lived in places where the boundary between the ordinary world and the supernatural is thin. But I was there. I saw what my sister became. And I need you to understand that before any of this began, we were just an ordinary family, living ordinary lives, in a place where the extraordinary had always been part of the natural order of things. After breakfast, our family scattered to begin the day's preparations, each of us moving into the familiar routines that had shaped our lives for as long as I could remember. Father gathered his tools for the rice fields. Mother organized the household tasks that would fill her morning, tending our vegetable garden and preparing ingredients for the midday meal. My younger brothers helped father load the wooden cart with the implements they would need for their work in the fields, and Yam and I prepared for our daily walk to school, gathering our simple supplies and checking that our uniforms were clean and properly arranged. Education was precious in our family. Father had only completed 4th grade before he was needed full-time in the rice fields to help support his own family. Mother could barely read, having grown up in an even smaller village where schools were considered unnecessary for girls, but they were determined that their children would have opportunities they had never known. I had finished my formal education the year before, but I continued to walk with Yam to school each day. The path to school led through the ancient forest that bordered our village, and our parents felt safer knowing that Yam didn't make that journey alone. Therefore, every school morning found us standing together at our doorway, ready to begin the 20-minute walk that would take us through some of the most beautiful and mysterious landscape in northern Thailand. The walk to school took us along a well-worn dirt path that had connected our village to the larger town for longer than anyone could remember. Generations of children had walked this same route. The forest was ancient, older than our village, older than the memories of our oldest residents. Massive trees with trunks so wide that 3 people holding hands couldn't reach around them created a canopy so thick that even on the brightest days the path remained cool and shadowed. Birds sang in the branches above us. Small animals rustled in the undergrowth, and the air was clean and cool even on the hottest days. Yam loved these morning walks almost as much as she loved school itself. She would point out changes in the forest from day to day, new flowers blooming, birds building nests, the way the light fell differently as the seasons changed. But there was one particular section of the path, about halfway to school, where the forest seemed to grow quieter, more watchful. We had always noticed it, though we never talked about it directly. It was just a place where we instinctively walked a little faster, spoke a little more softly, stayed a little closer together. The trees seemed older there, their branches intertwined in patterns that blocked out more light than elsewhere along the path. Even the birds seemed to sing more quietly in that section, as if they too recognized that this was a place that demanded respect. Therefore, when we reached the ancient spirit shrine that marked the halfway point of our journey, we always paused to pay our proper respects. The spirit shrine had been there longer than anyone could remember, built by our ancestors to honor the spirits who protected the forest and by extension our village. Yam would always choose the best flower from along the path to leave as an offering. She took this responsibility seriously, never picking the first flower she saw, but looking carefully until she found one that seemed particularly beautiful or perfect. However, as we drew closer to place our offering, I noticed something that made me pause. There was a figure standing perfectly still beside the shrine. A figure we were sure hadn't been there just a moment before. It was an elderly woman dressed in traditional Thai clothing that seemed to belong to another era entirely. Her sarong was a deep red that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and her blouse was white yet somehow appeared to glow in the shadowed forest. She was smiling at us, as if she had been waiting for us. The smile was too wide, too unnatural, yet it felt strangely familiar, as if we had known her for a long time. "Hello there," she said, using the traditional Thai greeting but speaking in a dialect I didn't recognize. Her voice was soft and pleasant, but something about it made the hair on my arm stand up. Yam stepped forward, always the more social of the two of us, and returned the greeting politely. "Hello, Auntie," she said, using the respectful term for an elderly woman. Are you visiting our village? The woman's smile grew even wider, if that was possible. I have been waiting for you, little one, she said, looking directly at Yam with an intensity that made me want to step between them. You have such beautiful eyes, such a bright spirit. The ancestors have told me much about you. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. Therefore, I reached for Yam's hand and gently pulled her back toward me. We need to get to school, I said, trying to keep my voice polite but firm. Thank you for your kind words, Auntie, but we don't want to be late. The woman nodded, but her eyes never left Yam's face. Of course, education is very important. But remember, little one, some lessons can only be learned in the old ways, in the old places with the old spirits as teachers. She turned and walked deeper into the forest, moving with a strange gliding-like motion that seemed to make no sound on the leaf-covered ground. Within moments, she had disappeared completely among the trees, as if the forest itself had swallowed her. Yam and I stood there for a long moment, both of us staring at the place where the woman had vanished. That was strange, Yam said finally, her voice small and uncertain. Did you know her, sis? She seemed to know us. I shook my head, still feeling unsettled by the entire encounter. I've never seen her before in my life, I replied. Come on, let's go to school. We're already going to be late. But as we hurried along the path toward town, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed, that our ordinary morning walk had somehow become the beginning of something we weren't prepared to understand. The day passed in a blur of routine activities. As I sat on the school grounds to pick up Yam, my mind kept returning to the woman at the shrine. Her too wide smile, her strange clothing, the way she had looked at Yam with such unsettling familiarity. Lost in thought, I saw one of Yam's friends, Siri Porn, walk past me. She was from a village even smaller than ours. I couldn't help but feel curious, so I asked if she had ever seen an elderly woman in traditional dress walking in the forest. You mean Yai Choe? She used to live in the old settlement deeper in the forest, but that was years ago. My grandmother told me she died last winter. I felt my stomach drop. Died? I repeated, hoping I had misunderstood. Yes, during the cold season. She was very old, and she lived alone after her family moved away to Bangkok. Why do you ask? You didn't see her, did you? I didn't know how to answer that question. How do you tell someone that you think you might have encountered a dead person without sounding like you've lost your mind? I just thought I saw someone who looked like her, I said, which was true enough without being the complete truth. Siriporn gave me a strange look. My grandmother says that some spirits don't rest easily, especially if they have unfinished business with the living. She says the forest spirits sometimes take the form of people we might recognize, to test our respect for the old ways. Her words lingered as the schoolyard noise rose around me, tugging me back toward ordinary explanations. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the woman had just been a visitor from another village, someone passing through who happened to know something about our family from mutual acquaintances. Maybe her strange appearance and behavior could be explained by age or illness or simply cultural differences I wasn't familiar with. Therefore, by the time school ended, I had almost convinced myself that the morning's events were nothing more than a chance encounter with an eccentric stranger. Almost. The walk home from school was always different from the morning journey, but that afternoon it felt particularly changed. The forest seemed darker, more watchful, as if the trees themselves were aware of the morning's strange encounter. Yam walked beside me quietly, occasionally glancing into the deeper parts of the forest as if she expected to see something moving among the shadows. "Sis," she said as we approached the spirit shrine, "do you think that woman this morning was really just a visitor?" I had been hoping she wouldn't bring up the encounter, that maybe she had dismissed it as easily as I was trying to do. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. She knew things about us. She called me little one, like grandmother does, and she looked at me like she had been watching me for a long time. And her clothes, they were beautiful, but they looked like the ones in the old photographs at the temple from when grandmother was young. I couldn't argue with her observations because they matched my own. The woman's clothing had indeed looked like something from decades past, and her manner of speaking had carried the formal cadences of an older generation. Maybe she was just very traditional. Maybe she came from one of the more remote villages where people still dress and speak in the old ways. Yam nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced any more than I was. As we passed the shrine, we noticed something. "Those flowers," Yam said, pointing to the offerings. "They weren't there this morning, were they?" I shook my head. In all the years we had been walking this path, I had never seen flowers like those at the shrine. The villagers usually left jasmine or marigolds, common flowers that grew in everyone's gardens. These red flowers were unlike anything that grew naturally in our forest. "Come on," I said, taking Yam's hand and pulling her gently away from the shrine. "Let's get home. Mother will be worried if we're late." But as we walked the final stretch of path toward our village, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Not by animals or birds, which would have been natural in the forest, but by something else. Something that moved just beyond the edge of vision, that made the shadows seem deeper and the familiar path feel suddenly foreign. Therefore, when we finally emerged from the forest and saw our village spread out before us in the golden afternoon light, I felt a relief so profound that I almost stumbled. Our home looked exactly as it had when we left that morning, but I felt that something had changed during our day away. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but the feeling of being watched hadn't left me, even now that we were back in the safety of our village. And when I looked at Yam as we approached our front door, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. She was humming softly under her breath, a melody I had never heard before. When I asked her about it, she looked surprised. "Was I humming?" she asked. "I didn't realize. It's just a song that's been stuck in my head all day." "Where did you hear it?" I pressed. "I don't remember. It just feels familiar, like something I've always known." That night, as our family gathered for dinner and shared the events of our day, neither Yam nor I mentioned the woman at the shrine. I told myself it was because we didn't want to worry our parents with what was probably nothing more than a strange but harmless encounter. But deep down, I think we both knew that talking about it would make it more real, more significant than we were ready to acknowledge. Some things are easier to dismiss when they remain unspoken. Some mysteries feel safer when they stay mysterious. But as I lay on my sleeping mat that night, listening to my family's peaceful breathing around me, I couldn't stop thinking about the woman's final words. Some lessons can only be learned in the old ways, in the old places, with the old spirits as teachers. What kind of lessons had she been talking about? And why had she seemed so certain that Yam would be the one to learn them? The thought kept me restless, and I found myself lying awake longer than usual. Beside me, Yam lay quietly on her sleeping mat, but I could tell from her breathing that she wasn't asleep either. "Sis," she whispered in the darkness, "do you believe in spirits?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. In our culture, belief in spirits wasn't really a matter of choice. It was simply part of the natural order. Yes, I whispered back. Don't you? I do, she said. But I never thought I would actually meet one. My heart began to beat faster. What do you mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. The woman at the shrine this morning. She wasn't alive, was she? The words hung in the darkness like a confession, like a secret that once spoken could never be taken back. I wanted to tell her she was being silly, that of course the woman had been alive, that there was a perfectly rational explanation for everything we had experienced. But I couldn't lie to her, not when I had felt the same otherworldly presence, the same certainty that we had encountered something beyond the ordinary world. I don't know, I said, but something about her felt different, wrong somehow. The way she looked at you like she had been waiting for you specifically. And those flowers, I've never seen anything like them in our forest. Yam was quiet for a long moment. I think she's going to come back, she said, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear her. I can feel her watching me, even now, like she's waiting for something. I reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. Whatever happens, we'll face it together, and if anything ever feels wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately. Promise. I promise, she whispered back. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that promises might not be enough to protect us from whatever forces had taken an interest in my little sister. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was the sound of Yam humming that strange, beautiful melody, so softly that it might have been part of a dream. Therefore, when I woke the next morning to find Yam's sleeping mat empty and the front door standing open, I knew immediately that our ordinary life had come to an end.